Hello, this is Sam Hall, the founder of 17%, interviewing Dr Suzanne Doyle-Morris, author of Beyond the Boys Club and an expert on women in business. 17% is an organisation to support and promote female playwrights and theatre practitioners. I came across a blog by Dr Suzanne Doyle-Morris, which offered what seemed like some extremely good advice for women in business, but also for women in theatre. So I contacted Suzanne to ask if her principles for women in business could be applied to women in the arts. Thank you for agreeing to share your expertise, Suzanne.
No, it's wonderful to be with you, Sam.
Brilliant. I'd like to focus specifically on how business principles could apply to women in the arts. Could you introduce yourself and say a little bit about your background?
Okay, so, I wrote Beyond the Boys Club a few years ago after I had spent a lot of time, I did my PhD at Cambridge looking at the experiences of women who worked in very male-dominated fields. And I was fascinated by this group of women because I've, been lifelong interested in successful women, but really particularly fascinated with women who thrive, not just survive, but really thrive in fields that were never really open to them. And I think playwriting is perhaps one of those fields as well. But historically, my clients have tended to be in the professional services, IT, the sciences. But as you cottoned on when you were reading the blog, no doubt, Sam, any field where the more senior you go or the more successful you become, the more you're surrounded by men, is technically a male-dominated field. So I see why you were interested in it originally.
Yeah, definitely. The stats are quite shocking. In the UK, it's 17%, which is why the organisation is called 17%, of female playwrights who actually get their plays on. And the main reason that I set up the organisation was because I've been on several playwriting courses, and at the courses you find that you've got maybe 80% plus of women participants. But when that actually translates into who's getting their work on, you find that it skews in completely the opposite direction. And 17%, if you're lucky, of women actually get their work on at the moment. Okay.
And so that, it makes sense. It's almost, the numbers flip almost from what you're seeing through people who are taking the courses. And that's the same at university level. We are now in the UK graduating more women out of university. And in fact, it's estimated by 2015, we're just talking a couple years away, 72% of all graduates will be female.
Wow.
But obviously when you start looking at where women are in the business world and their representation at the most senior levels, we're lucky to be hitting double digits. It's about 12.5% in FTSE 100 board companies. Now, I know that's different for playwrights, but it's the same principle, which is that you've got lots of well-intentioned, talented women doing these degrees, taking these courses. But at the levels, at the upper echelon, there's a dearth of them.
Have you got any ideas as to why that could be?
Well, I think it's several-fold. I think that one of people often talk about career breaks and maternity, but that's not really the whole issue, particularly when you talk with women who are about to take a maternity break, or essentially most women want to come back and work. It's a very rare woman that I'll ever meet who anticipates having children and then swanning off as we're reputed to do. Most women want to continue, and I actually think playwriting and being involved in the theater is a fantastic way to gain some balance over your career, probably far better than a lot of other professions where you have to be at a desk between 9 to 5 and increasingly 8 to 7. And I think that writing in general is a great profession for women who want to exercise more control over their lives. So I don't quite buy that whole issue that we're all off having babies. The other reasons, various reasons, people tend to promote, unfortunately, in their own likeness. So when you have groups of men at senior levels, and let's be honest, many of them are kind of what I'd call the stale, male, and pale brigade. They tend to identify, I should say, with younger versions of themselves, which means it's harder for anybody who doesn't look like them to get a leg up. And that's to a certain extent just human nature. We tend to gravitate towards those who remind us of ourselves. But however, it's just not helpful in the workplace. And I think the third reason is that There's an element of politics and self-promotion that goes in with getting into any senior role. And I think women are more reticent to do that. It's not considered ladylike behavior to tell everyone how great you are. But the more senior you become, and when you start to need to be negotiating for money for productions and getting your work produced, it's essential that you have those relationships and people who are willing to go to bat for you. And so you have to promote yourself, and you've got to get used to that as a skill.
Could you give some suggestions as to how how women in particular could promote themselves more?
I think that there's probably a variety of things, and when I work with my clients, because I do a lot of coaching for women in these areas, we look at everything from how they are in meetings, and what I mean by that is how do they hold themselves physically, but also what does their language belie? Do they use words like, I'm just working on a small project at the moment, which of course it tends to be a way that through that language we minimize what we're doing. Do we name drop with interesting people that we're working with? And sometimes, again, we feel that may be bragging a bit, but actually people need to know that others think you're great and and worth working with. It's everything from how we promote ourselves externally. So are we active in social media? Is our LinkedIn profile up to date? Are we using Twitter? Do we have a blog? I really commend you, Sam, for having a blog because it gives you an additional voice to your writing. There's lots of different things. Are you networking? Are you attending? Are you involved with groups like Women Playwrights, which is an organization dedicated to women in the field? Do you attend industry events? Who are you, for want of a better word, schmoozing with? But who are you getting noticed by? And who are you helping out yourself? Do you call in your favors? So there's quite a few things that individuals can do to start getting noticed and getting the recognition that they deserve.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a case that maybe people working in the arts need to start looking at it more professionally in a more kind of business manner. I'm an ex-journalist, so I'm kind of used to these sort of networking type things that you've got to attend. But I know sort of conversationally, a lot of writers don't actually like pushing themselves forward. A lot of writers are quite shy. So maybe that's one hurdle that needs to be overcome in some way.
It is to a certain extent. I'd be really interested. You said you used to work in journalism, and the difference that you see between the two industries is quite stark. What do you see as a key differential?
I worked in local journalism, so it was like a tiny little version of journalism, really. I saw a very male-dominated playing field where I very much felt that I had to be one of the guys to fit in. I don't find that in the theatre, but then maybe that's actually to my detriment. I'm not sure. I feel that it seems, on the one hand, it's a friendlier environment, but on the other hand, it's also just as cutthroat. It is quite a contrast. Yes.
So there. But what I'm hearing is there's politics in every industry, and you could go into something thinking it's much more, it's going to be much more touchy-feely or female-friendly. I have clients who work in the charity sector, and some of the stories they tell me are hair-raising.
Yeah.
But it's really funny because I think we all assume that these skills are for other people. That if your work is great, if you have a standalone piece, if you're going to be the next Lucy Preble or the next Ella Hickson, and you think that you can really shine and take your work to the next level, that's fantastic. But the reality is that meritocracy, true meritocracy, tends to be a myth. And that's something that women, particularly educated women, tend to hold on to. We think, it should be enough that I'm burning the candle at both ends, working long hours, that I produce a work of staggering genius. But if you don't know people and you don't have advocates on your side to help you say, okay, what are we going to do with this work, then, you might as well be writing just for yourself. And that's a really hard truth for women to hear. And certainly something I go into a lot of detail around how to get past that in Beyond the Boys Club.
Yeah, I think that's very true, actually. I definitely think that's true in my career. When I was in journalism, just starting out, I'd kind of almost have this thing where I didn't want people to help me out. So in a way, I was kind of, okay, well, that's great that you work for so-and-so, but, you know, I'm not interested in following up that contact. I want to get there on my own merits.
That sense of wanting to earn your, you know, to prove yourself, wanting to show your worth. And that's really so, you know, it's really admirable, but the funny thing is, it actually, the modern workplace just does not work that way.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, as a playwright, you know, you have to rely on dozens of other people to advocate your work. Every run from producers, directors, funders, people who will believe you and not just believe in you, but put their money and their time where their mouth is. And so having those relationships and having the credibility is all the more vital, because you can't just, you know, a playwright, as far as I'm concerned, you know, they don't exist on their own. You know, they don't exist in a vacuum. They have to have those relationships to get any of their work noticed. And that's just as much your day job, as far as I'm concerned, as writing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. I've noticed on your blog, one of the things that you kind of focus on is mentoring and coaching, whereas in the UK we're kind of less used to this idea. Why do you feel that that's important for women in particular?
I think when I talk on femalebreadwinners.com, which is where my blog is based, I talk a lot about mentoring and coaching, because really they are keys that will help get you to the next level. You know, to go back to your point a few minutes ago, Sam, which was a great one, which is I wanted to do it all on my own. I wanted to show my worth. You know, that's admirable, but equally, no man, you know, we've got to really not kid ourselves. No man has ever gotten to the top without plenty of help from other people. And mentoring and coaching are great ways of getting more support. So I would term mentoring that kind of relationship where you might work with somebody you might reach out to somebody in your industry, someone who's kind of been there, done that, and they can talk with you about what worked for them, and they can share stories as to strategies that they used, and they can kind of give you advice specific to your industry and the situation you're facing at that moment. Coaching, however, is different. Coaching is working with usually, an external objective outsider, and that person will help you make sense of your situation and get real clarity around what you want without saying, well, Sam, clearly the thing you need to do is X. Because actually, the coach doesn't necessarily know, but a good coach, and I feel this is my job, is to help pull out of you what you want, what your real goals are, what your real challenges are, and how we can move past them. But I won't tell you you need to do X, Y, and Z, because actually A, B, and C might be better for you, but it's my job to help get A, B, and C out of you. So mentoring and coaching are different things, but most of my clients, I coach them, but then I also encourage them. We look for mentors for them as well to reach out to, people in their own industry who can give them more nitty-gritty technical information.
Okay, that's brilliant. I've got one final question for you. If you had kind of one or two final bits of advice that you'd give to women writers and women working in the theatre that would kind of distill all your knowledge, probably quite a hard job at I would say, what would that be?
I think the key thing to do is some of what I've said, it may sound uncomfortable, to really push yourself, get out there, but we do have to stretch our comfort zones, because at the end of the day, no one is going to care about your playwriting career as much as you do. And so why should anybody else help you if you're not willing to help yourself? At the end of the day, it is completely and utterly up to you. So I think being really proactive and looking at what can I do, rather than saying, well, I can't do this or I can't do that, but what can you do? What are the networks you can attend? How can you start to raise your profile? Who can you be reaching out to? That's what I do with my clients, but, we first get really clear with the idea that, at the end of the day, the direction that your career takes is completely and utterly up to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Suzanne. I think that's brilliant advice. This has been Sam Hall, founder of 17%, interviewing Dr. Suzanne Doyle-Morris.
Thank you.